Americans collectively spend close to $60 billion a year on DoorDash alone. And that is not the whole food delivery industry, that is just one app. And the way they got there is worth understanding because a big chunk of that money came directly out of the pockets of people who thought they were just ordering dinner. So that is what this whole video is about. Not to make you feel bad for ordering a burrito, I still do occasionally, but to show you what's actually happening behind the screen, what it's quietly costing you over time. To understand why delivery apps are the way they are right now, you have to know a bit of history. When DoorDash, Uber Eats, and GrubHub launched in the early 2010s, they weren't trying to build a sustainable business. They were playing a different game entirely, a strategy called blitz scaling. The idea is to grow as fast as humanly possible, even if you were losing money on every single order. You flood the market with free delivery promos, you subsidize prices so they feel impossibly cheap, and you make the app so frictionless that it becomes a reflex, all with the goal of becoming so dominant that no competitor can catch up. And it worked. Local delivery ecosystems got dismantled, competitors got wiped out, and the habits got formed. And the problem is that the era of cheap growth capital is over. These companies now have to actually make money. And the way they are doing that is by squeezing every party in the transaction. That is the restaurants, the drivers, and ultimately you. They built a bridge between you and your food, and every time you cross it, you have to pay. So let's make this a little bit more concrete. Say you want a Big Mac meal. You drive to McDonald's and order at the counter. You're paying around $10, and that makes sense. It covers ingredients, staff, overhead, and a small profit margin. Now open the app and order the exact same meal. The menu price is already higher before any fees are added. Research has found that items are typically marked up 20 to 33% on delivery apps compared to what you'd pay in store. And the reason for this is that DoorDash and Uber Eats charge restaurants commissions of 20 to 30% on every order, and restaurants, which often operate on margins as thin as 3 to 5%, simply cannot absorb that. So they raise their app price to survive, and the cost is passed to you. And then the fees start: a delivery fee, a service fee, sometimes a small order fee. And these charges are deliberately presented in small scattered numbers that are easy to overlook. Add a tip for the driver, and that $10 meal is now $17, and that is a 70% markup. And here's something that surprised me when I first learned it. A lot of the local restaurants you see on these apps aren't actually local. They're ghost kitchens, virtual brands with no physical storefront, pumping out food from large industrial kitchens under made-up names. Cosmic Wings is Applebee's. It's Just Wings is Chili's. These virtual brands crowd out genuinely independent restaurants in the app's search results. And the sense of discovery and local support the app gives you is, in a lot of cases, manufactured. And what makes this even worse is how the app's algorithm works. Restaurants that pay for premium placement, essentially advertising fees on top of the commission they're already paying, appear higher in search results. And that means a real neighborhood spot that can't afford to play that game gets buried below a dozen corporate ghost brands with optimized names and professional food photography. You scroll thinking you are exploring your city's food scene, but you're mostly looking at a curated feed designed to maximize the platform's revenue and not your experience. And I think it's also worth talking about the people actually doing the deliveries because they're being squeezed too, just in a less visible way. Drivers were sold on flexibility and good pay. Because they are classified as independent contractors, the companies don't have to pay minimum wage, provide benefits, or contribute to taxes. Drivers cover gas, vehicle maintenance, and self-employment taxes themselves, and all of which eat significantly into earnings that look reasonable on paper. When California lawmakers pushed to reclassify drivers as employees, delivery companies collectively spent over $200 million campaigning to block it, and it worked. And these apps also use a gamification system that pressures drivers to accept low-paying orders to maintain their status and get access to better ones. And sometimes that means driving 10 miles for $3, which is a net loss after expenses. The system is designed to extract maximum effort at minimum cost, and that's not an accident, it's the margin. And it's worth noting this market is only going to get more concentrated. We are heading towards a future where a very small number of platforms control how food reaches your door, which tends to mean higher prices and fewer real alternatives. The squeeze you're feeling now is likely to get tighter and not looser, which makes it even more worth understanding why these apps are so hard to walk away from in the first place. Because knowing all of this doesn't necessarily make it easier to cook on a Tuesday night when you're exhausted, and that is genuinely by design. These apps are built by teams of behavioral scientists whose entire job is to remove what researchers call friction, and that is the small moments of resistance that naturally slow down spending. Entering your card number involves friction, handing over cash involves friction, and that friction is actually a form of financial protection. The app removes all of it. Payment is saved, the total cost is split into small, easy to ignore line items. You are hungry, it's 2 laps, the money leaves quietly, and you don't feel it go. There's a specific design choice I want to point out because once you see it, you can't unsee it. On most delivery apps, the tip screen comes after you have already chosen your restaurant, browsed the menu, built your cart, and mentally committed to the order. At that point, declining to tip or choosing a lower amount feels uncomfortable. You are essentially reversing a decision you have already made. The app puts you in a position where generosity feels like the path of least resistance. And the total cost only becomes fully visible right before you hit confirm, when you're least likely to back out. And again, that is not coincidence. Every screen in that flow was tested and refined to get you to spend more with less intention. And understanding this doesn't make you immune to it, but it does give you something to work with. And let me be straight with you about the math, because I think a lot of finance content overstates the math. The average person who regularly uses delivery apps spends about $150 a month, but you are going to spend some of that on food regardless. The real cost isn't the full 150, it's the premium you're paying on top of what you spend buying groceries or picking up an order yourself. And realistically, that gap is somewhere between $50 and $80 a month for most people. Let's call it $60 as a conservative middle estimate. If you redirected that $60 every month into a simple index fund and earned a conservative 7% average annual return, here's what the numbers look like over time. In 10 years, that is roughly $10,400. In 20 years, that is roughly $31,000. In 30 years, that is roughly $73,000. If your premium is closer to $100 a month, you are looking at over $120,000 after 30 years. And for actually getting started, I'd point you towards a brokerage with no account minimums and commission-free trades. Consider Fidelity and Vanguard. But if you want something with a more beginner-friendly interface, Public and Robinhood both make it easy to start buying ETFs with whatever amount you have. And the specific platform matters less than just getting started. What matters is that the money moves automatically before you have a chance to spend it. And to be clear, I'm not sharing these numbers to guilt you. I'm sharing them because I find it genuinely useful to make the abstract concrete. And small, recurring costs are easy to underestimate in the moment because each individual order feels minor, but spread over years, they are not. And one more thing that's worth setting up while you're at it is a net worth tracker. Apps like Empower, which is formerly Personal Capital, connect all your accounts in one place and show you your total assets minus your total debts in real time. And so, practically speaking, what do I do that might work for you? The act of deleting them breaks the automatic habit loop. If you want delivery now, you have to open a browser, find the site, enter your payment details. And that small amount of friction gives your brain a moment to actually think and decide rather than just react. It sounds minor, but it makes a real difference. And the second is a small one but worth mentioning, and that is switching back to cashback credit card for groceries. If you're going to spend money on food either way, you might as well earn something back on it. Cards like Chase Freedom Flex or the City Custom Cash gives you 3 to 5% cash back on grocery purchases, which partially offsets the cost of ingredients. And the key is paying the balance in full every single month. Carrying a balance on your credit card will cost you far more in interest than you'll ever earn in rewards. But if you're already disciplined about that, it's a genuinely easy way to get a little bit more out of every grocery run. And the third thing is making cooking easier, and to be clear, it doesn't have to be perfect. The reason why delivery wins on exhausting weeknights isn't that it tastes better, it's that it requires zero effort in the moment. And the way to compete with that is to do the effort up front. I spend about an hour on Sundays cooking a few simple things, and usually some chicken thighs, a big batch of rice, and whatever vegetables were on sale that week. Tuesday night when I'm done with work, dinner is already there. 2 minutes in the microwave, it costs maybe $3 a meal, and honestly, it's way faster than waiting for a delivery. And to put a real number on it, a week of dinners for one person, 5 meals, costs me roughly $15 in ingredients. The equivalent on a delivery app with fees and markup would run closer to $80 or $90. And you don't have to do this every meal. Even covering 3 or 4 weeknights a week closes most of the gap. The modern economy is very good at selling you small, repeated transactions that feel reasonable in the moment and add up to something significant over time. And I don't think the answer is never ever ordering food again. Sometimes it's absolutely the right call. Long weeks, difficult circumstances, or just wanting a treat. And those are all valid reasons. And the goal isn't to optimize every dollar out of your life. The goal is to actually be choosing. Because right now, a lot of us aren't really choosing. We're just defaulting. And there is a real difference between occasionally ordering delivery because it genuinely fits your life and ordering it 5 nights a week because an app made it slightly easier than opening your fridge. And that difference, compounded over years, is pretty substantial. So figure out what you're actually spending, redirect what you reasonably can, put that money somewhere it can grow, and the gap between where you are financially and where you want to be is usually smaller than it feels, and it tends to be hiding in the habits that seem too small to matter. And that's it for today. If you order delivery this week and you're now doing the mental math, that's good. That's exactly the point. Drop a comment below and tell me honestly, is food delivery a genuine necessity for some people, or has it become a lifestyle tax? And do you think these apps are genuinely evil, or are they just good at giving people what they want? If you found this useful, a like genuinely helps this channel reach more people, and subscribing means you'll be here for what's coming next, which is worth sticking around for. Because here's the thing, the delivery apps aren't the only industry that figured out how to make you pay premium for something your brain didn't need but couldn't resist. So in the next video, we are going into exactly how Big Sugar engineered one of the most successful consumer traps in history, and what is quietly costing your health and your wallet at the same time. That one's next, see you there.